I did not wear my wireless mic today. So, you're hot. So, Jane, next time you do the bulletin and the choirs thing, you don't put me after them. This just doesn't work out.
Where we've been in the past.
I have to up my game a little bit. So today's gospel reading, we had another curious story. It was kind of a strange parable coming from a guy who was known for some of his strange parables. And it's not because the story itself isn't clear, the base story behind it, because it seems pretty straightforward, even thousands of years later in a different culture. We can all kind of identify with what was happening. Even so, it's still kind of puzzling. The lead character in today's story was a judge, and we're told right off the bat that he had no regard for God nor man. In other words, he was so full of himself that he had no room to consider others. But this man faced a relentless onslaught from a widow who felt she had been wronged. And eventually, we're told, he allowed himself to be nagged into issuing a ruling in her favor. And there is no mistake about what happened there. Right in verse 5, the judge throws himself under the bus. Because he says, I will grant her justice so she won't wear me out by continually coming after me. According to footnotes in the one Bible that I used, there's a slightly different rendering of that sentence. And in that variant of the gospel, the judge throws up his hands and says, I will grant her justice so that she may not finally come and slap me in the face. I like that one more. So here we have a man who does not fear God or care about his fellow man, but he does have a healthy respect for a ticked-off widow who's going to come and slap him around. I understand that. But the central story then is about this guy who was nagged into doing the right thing. And for context, Luke tells us that at the very beginning, he says, Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray and not lose heart. So when you read through there, you get to verse 7, Jesus says, won't God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? But then connect that to the story, and then you think, is Jesus saying that God can be nagged into giving us what we want? Is he saying that by constant, unceasing prayer, we can just sort of cajole God into doing what we ask? Because that's what it kind of sounds like. And when you study this passage, this parable, you'll find that there are commentaries out there that take exactly that tack. They will tell you, be persistent in your prayer, and God will listen to you. Be relentless in your quest for justice, and God will grant justice. From that standpoint, then, this parable seems to be about faithful prayer being answered as sort of a reward for being persistent. So we have this idea of getting what you want basically by force of will, by wearing down God, which is what happened to the judge. And reading all of this made me think about my own childhood, which, of course, was a long time ago when I was young. When I was a kid, there was something in popular culture called the Chinese water torture. You might not be familiar with the concept, but the idea, so we thought, was that this was an ancient and fiendish way of breaking somebody's will by strapping them down to a chair or a table. And then you drip water on their forehead, slowly, drop by drop by drop. And this goes on for hours, or it goes on for days. And the story, at least, was that the slow, constant drip of water, and actually the anticipation of each drip, each drop, long kind of skin-crawling wait for that drop to fall in slow motion, splash against your forehead. But that would eventually break you. And when you broke, you do whatever somebody wanted. Tell them whatever they wanted to hear. That was the story. Now, there are a couple of points of clarification that I have to make. First, as it turns out, when you investigate, the Chinese had nothing to do with it. It was invented in Italy. Second, it's not all that ancient. It goes back to the 16th century, around the time, later years of the Inquisition, possibly. And the third thing you should know that it was not even attributed to the Chinese until early in the 20th century, a time when Western culture was very phobic about Asian culture. So when you had something fiendish, you could make points by attributing it to the Chinese. And of course, there's a fourth point. Anybody who is a parent or who has ever taken care of children already knows about this method of breaking resistance. Because children do this. They don't use water, of course, they use words. They use voices. They ask a question. Or they'll ask for something. And you say no. Or not now. And then they ask again. And again. And again. As a child, we learn that the best way to do this is during a long car ride. When you're confined and there's no escape. And you ask. And by refusing to let it drop as children, by refusing to let it drop, we know that eventually the parents are going to be left with a will as strong as Jell-O, quivering under the onslaught, fearfully anticipating that question again. And that is when parents, who at this point are often sleep deprived, and well aware that they're reaching the end of their rope, will give in. They will fold like a Maginot Line, and they will be driven to irrational acts. They end up doing something crazy, like perhaps buying a 9-year-old boy a drum set for Christmas. After he's asked for it like the 9 millionth time. And it is only after they've done this irrational thing that they realize the full horrifying consequences of giving a drum set to a 9-year-old. And then they are left with nothing else to do but arrange a mysterious accident to happen while they're at school. My mom went to her grave without confessing to that. But I know. Is that really the lesson that Jesus is trying to get across? We have to make tests of ourselves with our prayers that God will reward those who wear him down? Or is there more to this story? At the risk of sounding kind of Clinton-esque, it sort of depends upon what the definition of justice is. Because in the parable, remember, the judge, who was clearly not a man of character, did not honor either of the great commandments to love God or love your neighbor. This man is being harassed by a widow seeking justice. Nowadays, of course, you get a restraining order. Back then, eventually, he just gave up and dispensed justice, just to get her off his back. And then in the epilogue, Jesus tells us that God will grant justice to the chosen ones who cry out day and night, and He will grant justice to them. It says so right in the Gospel that we read, the NRSV version. Yet when you look further into it, you discover that in the parable, when he's talking about the justice that's being sought by the widow, which is eventually granted by the judge, the Greek word that Luke used is erdikio, which translates literally as vindicated, which can mean to execute justice, or in some cases to avenge a wrong or set something right. So the woman, the widow, is seeking vindication, seeking to have a wrong righted. And that's what the judge did. But when Jesus then starts talking about God in that last part of the passage, the word that we still see translated as justice, the Greek word that Luke used is different. The word he used, and I'm going to mispronounce it, so if you're Greek, I apologize. The word is poio, I should say. And when you look that up, that's a word with really broad definitions. It can mean to make or form or create or establish or accomplish. To make a covenant. Even to celebrate. When you look, the list of possibilities is about that long. And all of these different possibilities are really interesting, and we could spend, probably the next hour or two going over those, if you like. But we do have Family Fun Day. And that's probably not anybody's idea of fun. But the main idea that I'm trying to get across here is that even though both situations, both words get translated as justice, they are two different words, and they seem to mean, depending upon what's going on, two different things. In the context of the judge's story, the object of the widow and the decision of the judge is to do what's right by her. We don't know what that particular thing is. I assume because Jesus didn't think it was relevant to the story. That wasn't the point. The point was that eventually the judge was talked into doing what was right. She was vindicated. But in the context of God, it's a completely different story. In the context of God's chosen people, that's us. You can make the argument, or at least have the understanding from what was said, that the change in word choice means that Jesus was talking about something else. He was not talking about justice being done to us or for us. And the more I thought about that this week, the more I thought, wow, I hope it doesn't mean justice being done for us. Because the underlying truth here is that as sinners, we don't want justice. We want mercy. As sinners, the last thing that we want is for God to do what is right by us, the way the judge did what was right by the widow, because what's right for us, what we have earned, is separation from God. What we have earned on our own is death. By changing up his words, Jesus changes the outcome. Jesus does not promise justice to those who cry out. He promises justification. He promises that if we ask, if we sincerely ask, we'll be formed into something new, something better than we were. He promises that we will become new creations, that we will be born again. Jesus tells us that if we ask in faith, we will be justified in faith. So it seems that this maybe is not so much a lesson about the power of prayer or about persistence. Not even a prayer or a parable about God doing right by us because we are faithful in prayer, but it's about grace. In our need for grace. If you want to say it's about persistence, then I'll say, okay, it is about persistence, but it's about the persistence of God's love. It's about the persistence of God's grace. It's about the persistence of God's great work of redemption. That is ours. We are saved when we pray. You are saved when you cry out because of God's justifying grace. Because God knew you before you were born. And what we learned today is God is never going to give up on you. That is persistence.